Two nurses were walking down the hallway of the maternity ward, openly discussing the actions of their patients. Their shift was coming to an end, and both of them were clearly happy about it. It was only the unpleasant incident with one of their patients that still haunted the two friends. That's just unacceptable. How could a mother abandon her own baby? It's been a while since I last heard of something like that. Catherine was indignant. Megan was a bit more reserved in her statements and tried to understand the woman's motivation before condemning her. The patient's name was Rachel, and Megan knew that no one ever came to visit her, which raised a lot of questions in the nurse's mind. The baby's father must have broken up with Rachel, causing her to fall into depression. But it's her baby, a little beautiful baby. She looks like an angel. Catherine seemed to be intentionally adding fuel to the fire. Megan's heart was breaking. Unfortunately, Megan couldn't save a child of her own because of her health problems, so she had long dreamed of adopting one instead. That was why Rachel's situation could actually benefit Megan to a certain extent. The fact was that at that very moment, an interesting thought popped into the head of the desperate woman. Having realized that Rachel intended to abandon her own child, Megan decided to adopt the baby. This may be my only chance. It's now or never. I'm already 35 years old. My husband and I are drifting apart. Maybe a baby will bring us closer, the nurse thought. The woman felt it in her heart that Rachel wouldn't change her mind and would certainly leave her daughter at the orphanage. Megan realized that she needed to act right away. Having opened the door to Rachel's room, the nurse mustered up the courage and told her what she had in mind. Over the long years of the hospital's existence, it had witnessed all kinds of situations, but this conversation was still unique. At first, Rachel didn't take Megan's suggestion well, but when she realized the nurse's true motives, she changed her mind. Having reached a consensus, Megan and Rachel made a deal to never tell anyone the truth about the girl's birth. 20 years have passed. During this time, the lives of the woman changed completely. The weather was beautiful that day, and the morning rays of the sun had penetrated into the kitchen of Megan Rogers. "Monica, why aren't you eating your breakfast?" the woman asked anxiously. "I'm sorry, Mom, I don't have time for it. I need to get to work. We have a new child and he needs help adapting." Megan smiled and shook her head. Deep down, she was very proud of Monica, who worked as a caregiver in an orphanage. Her daughter had long become the meaning of Megan's life. Nevertheless, the former nurse never told Monica that she was adopted. All this time, Megan desperately tried to forget the events that happened 20 years ago, as they could hurt both her daughter and Megan herself. She never saw Rachel again and didn't condemn the woman for her decision. After Megan's husband died of a stroke 5 years ago, the former nurse dedicated her life to the happiness of her beloved daughter. She knew that Monica had a boyfriend, whom she'd seemed to like a lot. From her daughter, Megan learned that David grew up in a wealthy family. His father was a successful businessman who made his fortune in real estate. Deep down, Megan doubted whether such a relationship had potential. Due to her age and life experience, she knew that wealthy people tended to look for a partner within their own social circle. Megan and her daughter couldn't boast of any significant amount in their bank account or having their own business. When Monica decided to become a caretaker at an orphanage, Megan didn't object, but rather supported her daughter in her desire to help people. Megan loved children very much, and her daughter's position in life made perfect sense to her. She was happy to listen to Monica's stories about the wonderful children she was taking care of at the orphanage. So that day, Megan didn't keep her daughter, who was in a hurry to get to work, where a new unfortunate orphan was waiting for her. However, as soon as Monica got to the orphanage, she was approached by the nurse. "Miss Rogers, we did the initial checkup on the boy who got here last night." Looking into the nurse's eyes, Monica realized that it was only the beginning. "Billy has a heart defect. He needs to get surgery as soon as possible," the nurse continued. The nurse's answer shocked Monica. How could he have a heart defect? He's only 60 years old. Monica looked over the test results and realized that there was no mistake. Truth be told, Monica was well aware of the fact that heart disease can develop in a patient of any age. From Billy's documents, the caregiver learned that his parents had died in a car accident. The little boy survived simply because he was at preschool at the time. And now, having lost both of his parents, the boy ended up at an orphanage, where everything seemed to be so alien and hostile to him. For some unknown reason, Megan grew attached to the boy the moment she first saw him. Billy was very smart and developed beyond his years. It was all too obvious that he came from a good family, as he didn't have that feeling of abandonment and rowdiness about him, which was typical of homeless kiddos and kiddos from dysfunctional families. Monica understood that the boy would have a very hard time adapting to life at the orphanage. Statistics showed that it was best for children to go through the adoption process in early childhood. Billy felt very uncomfortable and looked like a hunted wolf cub. At some point, Monica caught herself thinking that she wanted to adopt this boy. She was almost 100% sure that she could persuade her fiancé David and her mother. Quite expectedly, Monica's coworkers didn't support her decision. Why would you want to raise someone else's child? You should think about yourself. Instead, you want to adopt a 6-year-old boy. Even more so, a sick boy. The other caretakers tried to reason with the woman, but there was no changing Monica's mind. When she was about to tell David and her mother about her decision, she was confident that she could count on their support and understanding. Megan accepted her daughter's decision with due humility. After all, she did adopt a child herself. Therefore, Megan simply had no right to criticize her daughter's choice. David was hesitant at first, but then he looked into his fiancée's eyes and simply couldn't say no to her. Being a kind and sweet man, he loved children just as much as Monica did. "It's okay, we'll adopt Billy, and then we'll have our own baby too," the man said, as if it was the most ordinary thing on earth. "Thank you, darling. I knew that you would understand and support me," Monica said. They had been dating for about 6 months and were determined to get married. During this time, David and Monica never got to know each other's parents. This was partly due to their workloads and partly due to the unwillingness of the parents themselves to meet the relatives of their kiddos' partners. Megan was rather self-conscious about meeting her wealthy in-laws, which was why she didn't insist on an introduction before the wedding. David's parents were busy people and didn't really have time to spare. As it turned out, the young people needed to get married before adopting little Billy, so that the boy would live in a full family. Those were the conditions put forward by the management of the orphanage. Thus, the question of whether to get married or not was solved. Planning the wedding took the couple about a month. David's parents took care of all the expenses. Megan didn't have as much money, but she still prepared a gift for the newlyweds. She loved her daughter with all of her heart and was ready to accept all of her choices. But the woman never told Monica that she was adopted. It just so happened that the couple's parents first met already at the wedding, which was held at one of the best restaurants in the city. This was where Megan first saw David's parents, too. Megan knew David personally, and her daughter brought him over on many occasions, but she'd never seen his parents before. Suddenly, Megan got a feeling that she'd seen David's mother before. She stepped closer and winced. "No, that's just impossible. Isn't it?" the woman whispered, turning pale. At that moment, Monica approached her mother. "Mom, are you all right? What happened? You look so pale." It seemed that Megan didn't even hear her daughter. Standing in front of her was Rachel, the same Rachel who abandoned her daughter 20 years ago. "We need to talk, honey," Megan said in a trembling voice. She took the bride by the hand and led her aside. The most terrifying thought at the moment was that Monica and David could actually be siblings. Of course, it wasn't the best time to have this conversation. But on the other hand, it definitely couldn't be postponed. Megan understood that something terrible could happen, and therefore she told her daughter about everything that had happened 20 years ago. To say that Monica was shocked would be a huge understatement. At first, the woman even thought that it was some kind of a bad joke. But when she saw her mother's tear-stained face, she realized that she was being completely serious. At this point, Rachel was watching the situation unfold and feeling very uncomfortable. She already realized that David's bride was her biological daughter. A lot had changed in Rachel's life over the years, and now she was embarrassed to look into the eyes of the woman she abandoned as a baby many years ago. But the most interesting thing was still ahead of them all. When Monica found out who her biological mother was, she was speechless for a while. Then she walked up to the stage on stiff legs and took the microphone. "My dear biological mother, what are we supposed to do now? David and I are brother and sister, aren't we?" Monica asked, having recovered from the initial shock. Tears were flowing down Rachel's face. Few people knew that she'd been thinking about her biological daughter all those years. Rachel knew that she couldn't turn back time, and there was no way she could get Monica back. Belated repentance was eating her from the inside, depriving the woman of peace and comfort. But what her daughter was afraid of wasn't actually true. "You're wrong, honey. David isn't my biological son. Many years ago, I married a man who already had a son from his previous marriage. I'd been raising him as my own all those years," Rachel said in a voice trembling with agitation. Now it was David's turn to be surprised. The man had no idea that Rachel wasn't his biological mother. Ironically, it took a wedding for all the family secrets to come to light. However, the most interesting thing was that there was no real damage done. David and Monica weren't related, so they could continue with their wedding. At first, Megan and Rachel kept their distance, but then they decided to leave the past in the past and found a way to move forward and be civil. Unable to stop crying, Rachel felt terrible about the decision she'd made 20 years ago. When the celebration ended, Rachel walked up to Monica and gave her a hug. Of course, the woman was well aware that she could never become her mother. Nevertheless, she was glad that she would now get the chance to see her daughter once in a while. Soon, David and Monica adopted little Billy just as they planned. Thanks to the timely surgery, the boy quickly recovered from his heart condition, which couldn't but please his adoptive parents. And a year later, Monica gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, whom she named Rachel in honor of her biological mother. Having reached a mutual understanding, the Morgan and Rogers families decided to continue to keep the secret, which lasted 20 years. Meanwhile, we're sure that their lives would be full of amazing moments, giving them something to talk about at the family dinners and tell their grandchildren when the time comes.